Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. You know, anything about CEO leadership, wow, that's my jam. And when I came across Brian Quail, I was like, we got to talk. We got to get you on the Nonprofit Show because when we talk about unlocking CEO potential and especially new CEOs, wow, Brian, this is going to be a barn burner of a conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Julia, thank you for having me. It's a great day to be here, and so honored to be on your show.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. You know, what's amazing about the nonprofit shows, we have these phenomenal supporters, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, Third Sector Company, Your Part-Time Controller, and JMT Consulting. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. Yes, I sound like I'm a 2-pack a day smoker right now because I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, but I'm flying solo today with Brian. But we have these amazing co-hosts that come to us from across the country, and they really are tremendous thought leaders in themselves. So, Brian Quail, you did the amazing thing. Not only are you a leader in Quail Consulting and bringing your wisdom to the world, but you've written a book, and I love this, The Ultimate Guide for New Nonprofit CEOs. You know, I don't think anyone else has taken this on, just the new.
You're exactly right. When I started to write this, I thought to myself, I want to do something that nobody else has ever done before. So in my research, sure enough, I found that there wasn't a blueprint or framework for how to onboard new CEOs. And having been a new CEO 3 different times, I onboarded myself for some very good reasons, which we'll talk about today. But so I'm glad that you highlighted that for me, Julia, because you're spot on.
You know, Brian, it's so interesting. I swear to you, just in the last 2.5 weeks, I've had a flurry of unrelated people ask me if I'm seeing a trend in younger CEOs being tapped on the shoulder, or not even CEOs, younger C-suite members being tapped on the shoulder and saying, okay, we think you'd be a good CEO. And them saying, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work that hard. I don't want to fail because I'm not prepared. I mean, which is fascinating because I can't ever remember a time when this was occurring. It seemed like more that there were just people were chomping at the bit to go up the ladder. And wow, so this is a really important time to have this conversation. And I'm just thrilled that we could get your thoughts and your opinions on this, because I want to start off with the question, like, what's the status of new CEOs in the nonprofit sector? We know that there's a big shift, but what's going on?
Yeah, I started from the premise when writing my book that, what I found in my research is that the Harvard Business Review said that that from 30 to 50% of new CEOs fail within the first 18 months on the job. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, by the way, Julia, what sector you're in. All sectors, public, private, and nonprofit, are third sector, which, but, the current state is that there's an annual churn of 18 to 22% of nonprofit CEOs leaving on an annual basis. Right now, that number is bumping higher because of what occurred through the pandemic and some other things. And, PwC came out with a study that said, hey, and it was in 2019 before everything happened. And they said people who are current CEOs and they leave, new people won't stay around as long. So that 5 to 6 year average is going to plummet. And another interesting indicator is that I also saw that 10,000 baby boomers will be turning age 65 from now until 2030. And so when you think about CEOs, C-suite leaders, and get this, volunteers who have been with your organization who are boomers, it's a vacuum of leadership that's exiting. And so for me, I thought, wow, I have to share how I did my format coming in as a new CEO, because
Mhm.
I'm in the nonprofit field for 4 decades, 25 years as a president CEO. So I wrote the book as a practitioner, you know,
Yeah.
and so hopefully what I've put in this book, and already I'm getting super feedback from um, new CEOs, even current CEOs, but more
Mhm.
importantly, to your point, Julia, I'm getting great input from rising leaders, people who are saying, "Hey, I think I want to be a CEO in a nonprofit," or someone in the private sector saying, "Hey, I want to switch careers. How do I do that?" And so
Yeah.
this book actually takes you through, and I guide people through uh, how to do exactly that through my
Mhm.
experience. But more importantly, I give what I think are great questions to be asked when you first come in as a new CEO, because that's when it's foundational. But
Yeah.
I've also seen, Julia, and you know this because I've seen your book about board champions.
Mhm.
Board members have to also play a different role now, and they
Yeah.
have to play a critical role in onboarding new CEOs. So many
Mhm.
times what we see, and I know you see this, Julia, is that everybody's excited after the search is over. New leader comes in, right? And then what happens? The board they're tired, right? Through the
Yeah.
exhaustive process. And so they
Yeah.
throw the keys to the organization, either literally or figuratively, to a new person and say, "Great, I'll see you next month. Let me know how it goes." And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, they don't realize that you have to have an onboarding strategy like you do for any other employee. And in the private, public sector, as well as a nonprofit, that onboarding and understanding culture, acronyms, the whole gamut, and more
Mhm.
importantly, community, your mission, your vision. So yeah,
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more because you have created the five frameworks approach.
yes.
And what does that look like so that we can kind of understand, Brian, how we should even be thinking about this?
Yeah, great question. So my five frameworks go like this, and one framework doesn't follow the other. So, and when you read my book, you'll see why. But the first framework is called 90 days, and I tell people that in your first 90 days, can you set a big, hairy, audacious goal as what you want to accomplish in your first 90 days? Because that first 90 days is really your honeymoon period,
Yep.
but it's
Mhm.
also the time to develop your elevator speech, ask
Mhm.
questions about your organization. And so I take people through, and the 90 days, quite frankly, is 6 chapters of my book, because
Uh,
I think it's that important because it's foundational. And I also highlight in the 90 days what's the communication protocol that's going to happen between your new board and you as the CEO. So
mhm.
very important. The second one is called your team. And you walk into a new situation, and so the management team that's there, some people are going to gravitate to the change and others are going to resist it. And
Right?
so I basically tell people, and I devote one chapter, chapter 5 in the book. All I do is say you have to have and ask all of your direct reports pointed questions about each of their areas. And I line out, through my experience, literally 5 direct reports that commonly will report to a CEO, and
Mhm.
say, "Hey, you've got to ask them these questions. And you also have to talk to the next layer of leadership down that are reporting to them." Why? Because that's where your rising stars are.
Right.
And if somebody leaves, then it's like, next person up.
Yeah.
you know, who are you going to look to?
Right.
Um, so that's framework 2, and we're going real quick here because it's a fun conversation, but hopefully it's enlightening where people will be
Sure.
motivated to say, "I got to learn more." Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the next one is the financials, and the financials is a different picture of what you would think it would be. Um,
Mhm.
and yes, it's about audits and it's about understanding the historical framework from a financial perspective of what you're
Mhm.
walking into. But
Yeah.
the other thing is, what are the assessments? If you are a part of a
Mhm.
national organization, but you have separate 501c3s from the mothership, but there's a charter you have to do, right?
Right.
You have to understand, what assessments do you need to do? What are the things that are needed there annually? And also, with the different pockets of money from state, federal, local, there's also now program audits and financial audits. So you got to be asking those questions and it seems like a lot to ask, but it's really kind of fun, because then you're really learning your organization very, very quickly. And you're getting answers to questions that you as a CEO need to know, because what I tell every new CEO, you got to know your numbers.
Absolutely.
Your numbers, right? And on that line, I also do the fourth framework called donor relationships.
Good.
And what I'm doing this one, because over the course of my career, I actually cut my teeth initially in the development arena. And one of the things I say in this particular section is, you have to understand all of your revenue lines in your portfolio of funds. So what do those grants look like? Are they, from state, federal, family foundations? Are they restricted, unrestricted? What are the things that you can really look at from the donor relationship aspect and understand who's been with you, why they're with you, and what are all the good things that you need to do to kind of understand your organization? Do you have a good structure for your CRM, in terms of how you're going to actually use your data, tell your story? And so, what I also like to say in this section is that I say that, your board members are your treasure hunters. And you have to operate from a mindset of abundance. And so, the biggest call out I do here is that people give to people, not to organizations. And it's really key for new people to, especially a new CEO, if they're an outsider CEO who maybe never has run a nonprofit organization, this is all really new. And so this particular chapter just walks you through it. I also talk about how you prepare for calls, what to do. So yeah, it's
very interesting.
It's real interesting. I like to think, and it took me 2.5 years to write this book, so I didn't do it quickly, right? And you wrote a book. It takes time. It's hard work.
Well, I think the thing that's so interesting is that, from my point of view, Brian, we talk about this major shift in our labor market, the demographics of leadership, and how it's changing for many reasons. But we don't talk about how to make that next group successful.
Right.
And at the same time, we're dealing with a new type of leadership, because it's a younger leadership that is used to a completely different style of work, right? And so I find it absolutely fascinating that you could be in this time and place, because this is a real discussion. You mentioned when we got started about board support and how boards can work. And I agree with you. I think there are a lot of boards that are like, whew, we got the CEO, go get him, Tiger. And then it's easy to complain. It's easy to say, well, why isn't this working? And then there's that point where the board is fearful of letting somebody go or having to start the process over again. And so you kind of disengage and you create a whole nother host of problems. So with your experience, do you see that boards understand this onboarding concept? You brought that up, and I think it's a really interesting discussion, because I frankly don't see boards understanding that this is part of their role.
Well, I'm going to say something either controversial or, but boards don't know how to onboard new CEOs, and they never will. Why? Because that isn't why they were recruited in to be a board member. It was because of the mission to help to raise money or to bring in a needed skill. What this book does, in my opinion, and why I wrote it, is that it really says, here is a format, here is a framework, here is a roadmap where you share with your board as the new CEO of what you are going to do. And so that's why I'm so excited about this book. And I would argue the reason that we're seeing such high turnover rates, especially in our new leaders, is that boards don't know how to onboard new leaders who are coming in who have never been a CEO before.
Right.
All of a sudden go, oh no, how do I tackle this? How do I, how do I do this? And so I wrote the book specifically saying, hey, in the first 12 months, you have to work in the business.
Mm-hmm.
But after 12 months, you need to start to work on the business. Mm-hmm. But that first year becomes a very critical time to understand the groundwork. And, and that's what I say in the last framework that I have it. I call it the who. You have to bring this all together and then to say, okay, I've done my analysis. I've talked to the folks. I've got the right people in the right seats. And it's about, now, how are we going to address the who, the people that we're serving? And how does your board play a key role in that? And sometimes boards shy away from that, or other times they want to grab the wheel. And like, no, you got to have balance.
You got it,
This book provides balance. And I would say where the book is really key is that it should be not only reviewed by a new CEO, it should be reviewed by a board and a search committee before they jump into doing it. It's also for those advancing leaders, but more importantly, for staff teams. When a new leader's coming in, this book also says to those folks, hey, how about your new leader? If you're running the development area or the finance area, get answers to these questions to provide to your new leader as she or he walks through the door. You're going to have, one, a better relationship, and two, you're going to understand the needs of what they need to know. And I would also say that board members, when they read this book, won't think of the things that they should know, like what's cash flow? What's the 36 months of cash flow look like historically? What is, all those things. You're running a business. This is a business, right? And what the funny thing is, Julia, I've got more people from the private sector now reading my book who are going, exactly, because it all pertains, right? So it's and I think that boards really need to lock and load on this one, and they can't walk away. They've got to be a part of the process. And I kind of describe how they can be and should be.
I think it's absolutely fascinating because there's so much fear in the process of building a relationship between that CEO and the board.
Yep.
And I find one of the things that's very interesting is that you are coming from a demographic, let's say the baby boomers, who would go to their grave before they would admit to fear or having a problem.
Right.
And then you have this like millennial, Gen X millennial movement where they tend to overshare. They tend to be like, much more invested in the blend of their personal life, talking about things that a lot of older leaders, especially I'm talking about boards, would find uncomfortable. And I find that this is a really interesting level. I talk with leaders about this a lot, especially leaders who are not comfortable with some of the interpersonal relationships that are now a standard of operations. Talking about things that you would never, that whole adage, the way I was raised, you go to the office and you're at the office.
Yep.
You don't blend your personal life. You don't talk about it. You don't admit to it, blah, 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 versus this new leadership that's going to bring that, authenticity or that piece of their lives forward. And I find this is to be a real structural change for board relationships to CEOs. And I'm wondering if that kind of is something that we need to be talking about, because our boards don't always understand how this next generation thinks and leads.
Exactly. And, when I was coming up in my career, there were more leadership programs, it felt like, in the organizations I worked in, and there was an investment of that I really don't see that as much anymore. And that's why I wrote this book, to be quite honest with you, because, and that's why I, go out there and do speaking. I, do consulting one-on-one. People are now saying, hey, Brian, maybe what you should do is do your 5 frameworks as kind of a class over a period of time, and, really step people and walk people through it. And, we'll see how that goes. But, I always say that, there's not an easy button to push.
No.
And when people ask me, oh, am I going to be successful if I follow the 5 frameworks? And my answer is yes, but with this one caveat: simple isn't the same as easy. And it's simple for me to say, yeah, follow the 5 frameworks, you'll be successful. But it's not going to be easy to follow the 5 frameworks as I'm going to suggest to you. Why? Because it takes time and understanding. But if you really follow and implement what I'm suggesting through these 5 frameworks, I guarantee success. Because there's no other way around it. And there's no shortcut in this. But as I've said to people I've been working with, and I love working with people who, want this, and they're drinking the Kool-Aid now. It's about really understanding that you can really have fun in a career as a CEO, because it brings about, as you know, great satisfaction, and knowing that you're doing something to changing lives and saving lives. I mean, and I give case studies and examples in the book, and, there are things that I've done in my career that are still in existence today. And I try to say to people, it's because when I first started, like you're starting, I took that first year to work in the business. But then I knew it was time for me to work on the business. And once I had the commitment of the right leaders in the right places, and my board wanted to be a part of the process, we achieved great results. I mean, great results. So
let's talk about this as we finish up, because I ask this question a lot with different guests. And what is the amount of time that we need to get that new CEO leading? So you gave us kind of an idea for, a year working in the business, then you work on the business. But let's be real about boards meeting and the influence of that type of leadership. Sometimes they only meet once a quarter, or they're not going to be there to that extent. And now we have remote working, a remote labor force. That time of, we would say, meeting around the water cooler, or just that serendipity of meeting and leading, has changed so dramatically. So with a new CEO, what should we be thinking about?
Yeah, well, I also think this may be controversial of how I'll answer this question, but the length of time, there is no length of time.
Okay.
When you step through the door day one, you're going to lead. But there are little things you can do. And here's a suggestion I just gave to someone I'm working with, and I said, do something simple. And they said, like what? I said, your new office, is the office the same as what the old leader was, how it was set up? They said, yeah. I said, change it.
Change it.
Because once we change it, they're going to say, hey, this is a new day, new leader.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is making sure that you're getting out in the community and seeing people on their turf and their terms. And, the little things like changing the ballast in the lighting if it's not great in your building and people complain about it, or the break room hasn't been painted since Hector was a pup, right? There's an old adage for you. But what are some things that you can do right away that makes a difference in the lives of the people who are working mission critical? That's when you start to lead. Leading isn't about, making landing that big gift in 30 days. It's not going to happen, most likely, right? It's just not.
Right.
But when you start to really show people, as I suggest in what I go through in the first 90 days with them, I'm basically saying, get out of your office, go meet people where they are. Example, my first role, I was a United Way executive. We were funding 78 agencies, funding 100 programs. I made the big, hairy, audacious goal that in the first 90 days, I was going to go meet every one of those CEOs at their organizations to see those programs operating. And I did it. And it was a tri-county area. And when I did that, it was like, hey, this guy's leading.
Yeah.
He's going to see me. No, and I got responses, Julia, like you wouldn't believe. Hey, I never saw the other guy. Matter of fact, I've been here for 20 years. The CEO of the United Way never set foot in my office at that time. And that's not a dig on anybody, but it's a reality of, so in answer to the question, hey, what's the length of time? It's kind of like that McDonald's moment. I made the order, and if you got to wait for more than 30 seconds to a minute, you get antsy and upset. And that's what's in people's minds. And so you got to show as a leader coming in that, hey, you're going to lead, and leading is really demonstrated through very different ways. And knowing that, again, in that first year, and what I say people need to do is, making change and being a leader is also understanding where people are, and they want to be recognized, and they want to know that you care. And the biggest element, I think, and it's having, candid conversations with boards. If you really want change, are you up for it? We're going to do it.
And I think I love that you made that comment, because I think that talk about fear-based issues. That's really a hard thing to embrace change. I mean, you want change on certain ways, but then are you willing to make that investment and be uncomfortable? And maybe not have all the answers, and have to create a new journey. That's a heavy lift for a lot of organizations.
And sometimes I look at being the CEO as being the air traffic controller of your organization. You need to understand what is operating in each of the areas, how you'll bring people together to take down the silos. But more importantly, sometimes what I've found is that people don't realize what even the person or persons that work right next to them are doing. And so a big thing is, bringing folks together in ways regarding the work to say, hey, without understanding each other, we're not going to provide the mission critical the way we could or should. And, I'm really kind of scratching the surface here on some stuff, but at the end of the day, I tell you, I'm so proud of this book because, I wrote it differently. I'm not from academia, right? I'm a practitioner, and the responses I've gotten back from people have been, hey, you know what? I've implemented your 5 frameworks. I'm using it, and thank you. It's made a difference. So, yeah.
Well, let's remind our viewers and our listeners, you can get a copy of The Ultimate Guide for New Nonprofit CEOs, written by Brian Quail, our guest today. He's the CEO and founder of Quail Consulting. You can go to brianquail.com. You can buy this on Amazon. And it's really, I think, and you made a comment that I just loved, Brian, and that was that, maybe the time to get started on this journey and to understand with the help of your book is not when you're in the throes of finishing up a new hire, but it's when you're going to be looking at change. And hopefully you will have that opportunity with your outgoing CEO to understand that there's going to be a process and a new journey. I love the idea of investing in this training and thought leadership so that you can have a better picture of what it's going to take to bring in somebody so they can be successful.
Yeah, and I really believe that in order to be a successful CEO, nobody runs through with you the nuts and bolts of being a good CEO and managing an organization. This book does that, and there's a lot of great leadership programs. But to your point, as we started, there's no book like this out there, and I'm real proud of it.
Yeah, you should be. Really exciting. Again, Brian Quail, CEO and founder of Quail Consulting. You can learn more about Brian at brianquail.com and check out the Ultimate Guide for New Nonprofit CEOs. Again, you can buy that online. And I just think it's a really good conversation, Brian, that we've had with you today, because there's so much change. There's so much opportunity with that change, but certainly it's not very easy. And so if we can get a leg up on this, it's just absolutely brilliant. Hey, I want to make sure that we give a shout out and acknowledge our amazing sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, Third Sector Company, Your Part-Time Controller, JMT Consulting, and Fundraisers Friday. These are the folks that make a difference in so many lives day in and day out. Brian, thank you so much for being with us. This has really been fun.
Well, thank you, Julia. Again, honored to have been with you, and I had fun as well.
Good, good. Well, hey, we end each and every episode with this mantra, and it means something different to me when I think about new CEOs and new leadership. And it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well.